What is it that calls us to create? What do we listen to? How do we make more space within for what wants to emerge? Not what we want to write, but what wants to be written. And how do we support that in each other? Writing groups can be wonderful if they can make lots of space to help fertilize the ground. They can also, in my experience, be a little bit terrifying in suffocating those little shoots that want to come up. So a lot of things to think about in a writer's retreat. And we are going to do some meditation. Whether you meditate or not, it will be loose enough so that you can contemplate, you can pray, you can sit quietly, you can even daydream. But we will create those silent spaces because we're here for a couple of days and we're going to need space, not just to write, but just to be. And I think we're in a beautiful context for that because people have sat and listened to that call for a century here and coming out of a tradition much longer. So every institution has its pros and cons, but what I like about coming to a place like this is it creates room for the numinous, for that which is sacred. And I think the creative process is also part of what emerges. Sanctity, blessedness doesn't have to be traditionally spiritual or religious. It is also part of our connecting and being able to give voice to that human aspiration or struggle or humor or whatever it might be. So that's what we're here to do. And we'll listen to some readings, we'll do some writing to prompts, we'll do some free-form writing, we'll do some sharing of our writing. I wrote a little book where I took passages from the letters of a French paleontologist and Jesuit priest, Théo Desjardins. Now, he was mostly known in his life as an amazing scientist. He also had this incredible evolutionary theory and knowingness. And because of that, the Catholic Church was not very happy with him teaching science in Paris, the Catholic University. So they sent him to the back of beyond in China, where for almost 2 decades he did a lot of field research, which he loved. And he found at that point one of the oldest humanoid skulls, which is known as the Peking Man. So that's one of his findings. A lot of his findings are at UPenn Museum of Archaeology. And he published many, many academic papers. But what really moved him was this sense that God's work on earth is not finished. So he wanted to be a priest from a very young age. I'm not Catholic myself, but I really appreciate his work. And he felt that God is in a process of emergence. And the church didn't like that very much. But after his death in 1955, his writings were able to be published. So one of the things that he did, this whole vision came to him when he was a medic on the front lines of World War I. So he was 20-something in, like, World War I was one of the most brutal and gruesome wars. They still fought with bayonets. And they constantly wanted to promote him, and he kept saying, I want to stay as a stretcher bearer. And he stayed with the men. And in the midst of that horror, he started intuiting this vision. The work is evolving. Our humanity is evolving. Our capacities are evolving. And it starts from mollusks and single-cell organisms and goes all the way up to human consciousness. And that we're evolving towards, you might have heard the term, the omega point, towards that. God is perfect and full in the present, he would say, but there's a tractor beam to the future of higher and higher orders of harmony and integration. So you can imagine the creative ear he had to be in the midst of something that is so demoralizing and so painful and so tragic, and to start intuiting this beautiful, as yet unarticulated sense of how the human spirit's evolving. So I took some of his, he wrote in French. I don't speak French, but even in French, he's notoriously hard to read. His translations in English are not any better. So I took some of his passages and I structured them as poems, and then I wrote essays about them. So I was invited by a beautiful nun, Sister Kathy Duffy, in Philadelphia, who's the head of the American Tarot Association, to do a workshop. And I did a writing workshop on his work and his life. And Therese was on that. So she had a great time, and she said, would you do a writing retreat for us? I said, well, sure. I don't usually do that. I run a nonprofit that teaches mindfulness and systems thinking in high schools in Philadelphia. And we work with about 2,500 kids a year in a 3-month program. I don't really have time to do retreats, but I'd be happy to. So that's how this came about. I have been writing since I could hold a pencil. I always wrote. I always wrote. My 5th grade teacher, Mrs. McVeigh, encouraged me to write. And I am sure that that set me on my path. In high school, I did summer writing programs. I ran the poetry workshop. I lived in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh was not very, it was still really stuck in the 50s, in the 70s. But a few people would come through. Seamus Heaney came through, the famous poet. Allen Ginsberg came through with his entourage, and people like that. And so I kept writing and kept seeking for what I felt was wisdom to help me make sense of a world that was not going very well as far as I could tell. It was post-Watergate, it's in the 70s, 60s didn't work out. I was still idealistic like the 60s, but I didn't expect flower power to change the world anymore. So it was a very cynical time, and writing really helped me get through that. So that's a little, and I've written a couple of books, and I write every day. If I don't write, I get very agitated. And if I get very busy with the practical, my solution to dealing with that is to write a book. So I wrote Adventure in Zanskar, which is a book I had wanted to write since about 1986. I finally wrote it during COVID when my program switched online. We were running 70 classrooms a week. And there were 5 of us, and I was the head of it. So I was dealing with schedules and children and schools and panic, and and the only way I could feel like I was nurturing myself and not getting lost in everybody else's emotionalism was to write the book I'd always wanted to write. So if I had 15 minutes between classes, I'd just write a little more, and then eventually it got done. So that was my COVID project. It wasn't my COVID project because I had time. It was the opposite. And yeah, so you asked, how do you get a book done? If you see writing as something that helps you cope with the busyness of life, rather than something you do when the busyness subsides and you have that beautiful 5 hours where you can steep and immerse, or if you ever read Stephen King on writing, you just go in, you lock the door, you don't do anything. Dan Brown, he starts at, 4 in the morning, and he doesn't have Wi-Fi, he doesn't have phone where he writes. I don't know how he does any research when he writes. They're career writers, and they work at their craft, which is amazing. but many of us have to write around the edges, right around the edges of everything else. So I think it's a luxury that we've got this time this weekend. And what I want to invite you to do is to leave aside your customary way of relating, of listening, of writing, and let yourself experiment. Let yourself really listen. Because oftentimes we're listening for something that we don't know how to say it, or we're listening to a word that we don't know what it is, but we know when the wrong word is used, it doesn't sound right, doesn't have the right letters, it's onomatopoetically, it's not evoking what it needs to. And it can get very frustrating. Then you look up thesaurus and you look up synonyms and they're all really crappy. And you're like, there must be better words than this. That's why we just need to listen in order to write. And a lot of beautiful writing is taking the ordinary and having it mean so much more without you forcing it to mean more. When I was in high school, I loved Theodore Roethke. I read him endlessly, over and over and over again, the same poems. And there's this one line: I knew a woman lovely in her bones. When small birds sighed, she would sigh back at them. It's just one of those lines that, for whatever reason, I have heard the musicality of that line since 1978 in my head. And just the sense of a small bird sighing, and you think of bird bones being so small and delicate and porous, and you think of a woman being so lovely in her bones and that porousness and lightness. And I don't know what he meant. I don't know what he was trying to evoke, but the simple juxtaposition of that image and a person lets the reader fall into whatever they want to feel from it. And that happens when we also stop imposing our conceptual mind on every metaphor we make. Sometimes they don't totally make sense, but we want to use them. I've had writing critique where they've told me, you can't use that metaphor, it doesn't make sense. I say, yeah, but that's the one that fits. That's the one that wants to be used, and there's a reason for it. And I might not be able to explain it to you now, but I might be able to explain it to you later. You might find that you want to move out of the genre or audience that you've written for. Maybe you always write really for yourself. Maybe you do want to experiment with humor or rhyme or older people or younger people. Maybe there's a genre for seniors. There are a lot of movies now for seniors because all the directors are getting older. I think there's also a writing style that could be different. As you start feeling that thinness between this world and what comes next, that transparency. So that would be interesting to express in writing. So I'm just saying this is a time to not just try to write your best piece, but to color outside of the lines. Writing is one of those things. As much as you share, it's still a very personal, intimate process. It's a very solitary process, whether you write in a group or because you're pulling from somewhere. It's not even necessarily in you, because sometimes it comes from out there somewhere. It doesn't really have anything to do with you. And you're like, why am I writing about that? But I don't know, but I need to write about that. But it still is something that you have to bring forth. I mean, that's hard. But even that, you both still have to kind of bring it from yourselves. It's a little different than, like, musicians, you almost feel like in the creative act they're doing it together, but I've never met people who really create written work as a group. I know people work on screenplays do, but
We've been collaborating with an illustrator. It is a very solitary thing. It's like you tell them the vision, and then they come back with
their vision and
tweak it.
yeah.
And it's usually not at all what I thought it was going to be like, but somehow it does work to tell the story.
Yeah. So right now, what I said at the beginning is meditation is usually a part of what I do when I do retreats. I don't really know, she'll have to come and speak for herself. But I know not everybody meditates, so I'll do things in an open way. But we can either, I had a kind of meditation that I was thinking would be fun, or we could do some writing, or we could do some writing first and then meditate. It's up to you guys.
Volunteer, I guess I'd say writing first.
Okay, so writing first it is. And what I invited everyone to do is, we're going to have lots of short periods of little bits of writing. So I invite you all to experiment. So maybe you have the way you usually write and you want to write something you want to use this time, but also experiment. Experiment with different voices, experiment with different styles, experiment with different age groups that you're writing to, just for fun, just to loosen things up. You can throw it all out before you leave. We're going to do some writing prompts. And I want to invite you to experiment. Maybe experiment with a different style than you usually do. So maybe you haven't written a limerick since 4th grade. And, or maybe you're going to try to write a horror story. Just allow yourself to feel completely free of, I need to work on my craft in the way that I've been working on it, unless you really want to do that. And if you want to do, fine too. But I want to just have this space be one where you're not trying to write the best. We will share some of the things, but people don't have to share if they don't. You're not trying to write the best perfect thing. You're just exploring writing and writing in different ways. I don't write children's poems. I don't write rhymes, but that poem's been with me since I was a child. So just so that we can feel free. Because one thing about writing is, my experience of writing is, the more I write, the more I'm in some kind of space that's like pulling me down further and further and further. And in some ways, I can almost see less and less and less of where I'm going. It's almost like a tunnel where the space gets. I'm just in, and I don't know really what I'm writing, but I'm writing, and it's all going to work out or not. I'll find out after. So I just wanted to invite you, just to play around. Yeah, just for fun. I thought that we could all write about transition. So whether it's transition of seasons, transition from one state of being to another state of being, transition from one form to another form, it can be emergence, it can be decay, it can be a crumbling, it can be unfolding. Any way you want to take it. It can be humorous and playful. It can be sinister and end of the world, and anything in between.